Yeah, so welcome again, Dena. You know, it's good to welcome. David's been here before, you know, but there's a lot to talk about. You know, this Durban thing, that thing from last year. Were you involved in a seminal kind of way getting that spiritual convention started last year?
We were essential. We were critical right from the beginning.
All right. Welcome very much to Conversations, where it's a pleasure to welcome two people from the Rooter Finn Group, as it's now called. And if I may, on my far left is Dena Merrian. She is the vice chair of the organization. And Dena, welcome really very much to Conversations and Manhattan Network. And on my immediate left is David Finn, who is no stranger to viewers of Conversations. He's the chair of the Rooter Finn Group, and he's been a guest in the past. He's leading photographer of sculpture of anyone else on this whole planet, I would think it's true to say, and has built this very, very socially conscious and important public relations firm, the Rooter Finn Group. And David, once again, thank you very, very much to Conversation.
Harold, it's a pleasure to be here.
As always, it's a pleasure to welcome you and your lovely daughter, if we may say so now. We want to talk. There's a great deal that is going on now, but we particularly want to talk about the conference that was held last year. Maybe you can fill us in on this, because Rooter Finn or you were involved, but we had this incredible Millennium Summit. David, you're in good association with Mr. Kofi Annan. We had the Millennium Summit, and then there was a gathering of the spiritual leadership, as it were, of the world to try and get some perspective on global issues. And I wonder, maybe either one of you who want to fill in, when you got involved in that and what your role was and the importance of it, because if I understand, that organization and that group was seminal to the conference that's being called in Durban now. The racism conference is being called in Durban now as we talk on the 30th of August of 2001. But the conference a year ago, could you talk to some about that?
Let me give a little bit of background.
All right, fine.
When Kofi Annan was first elected Secretary General, there was a interfaith service to welcome him and offer prayers for his success. It was held at St. Bartholomew here in New York. And there were how many religious leaders?
About 25.
And it was a 1 hour service.
I see.
And everybody was limited to, I think,
a minute.
1
minute. A minute, right? Yeah, it's really short.
And there were Buddhists and there were Hindus and Jews and Christians and Muslims and so on.
All with a lot to say.
Limited for everybody stuck to that minute. It was really quite wonderful. And Kofi Annan was there, and he thanked everybody, and he spoke for a minute also. And that was very moving moment. And then the second time it happened, and I guess Dean Morton of Trinity Church was one of the key figures in that, and a man named Bawa Jain, who was a Jain, worked very closely with him and took the lead in getting these religious leaders to get together. And then I guess it was Bawa who came up with the idea, wasn't it? Then you take on from there.
Well, the original idea came from a conversation with Ted Turner and Kofi Annan when Ted Turner was considering his gift to the United Nations.
Yeah, that incredible, huge gift that he gave to the UN.
He said to Secretary General at one point, if you really want peace in the world, ask the religious leaders to come to the United Nations and sign a commitment to peace. So from that statement, a man, Maurice Strong, who was Undersecretary General,
Maurice Strong, of course,
was in the room, and he was very close to Bawa. He called Bawa and he told him this idea, and Bawa said, we're going to do it. That was 3 years before the summit.
3 years.
So it took 3 years from the initial thought, which came out of that conversation, Ted Turner and Kofi Annan, and we worked very closely with the Secretary General. So
right from the beginning?
Right from the beginning. The Secretary General directed Bawa Jain to us, to Rooter Finn, because of his relationship with David. And so he approached us about 9 months later. It took a while to really germinate. But it was in the summer, I guess, of 1998 that we really started working on it. So we were involved from the very beginning in terms of getting the concept together, getting the list together, the program, fundraising, every step of it.
We had a planning group. What did we call the planning group?
We had an executive committee planning group, and we worked very closely with...
I was chairman of that.
You are still chairman.
Yeah, you're still chair of that, right? And Maurice Strong?
And Maurice Strong. We continue to work very closely on follow-up because...
And Gillian Sorensen.
And Gillian Sorensen for the Secretary. We work very closely with many different offices within the United Nations to plan this event.
Was it a unique thing to be calling the spiritual leadership of the world? It is,
Never happened before.
Yeah, because it's always this secular stuff,
And the UN has never gotten involved with religion. And this was really a new initiative.
And Bawa Jain traveled around the world several times, meeting with the religious leaders. He went to the Vaticans and talked to them, and went to India and China and everywhere.
We had participation, strong participation from China.
Yeah.
The Director General of Religion there contacted us early on. They wanted to organize a delegation.
That's interesting. And that is interesting.
He went to Israel, went to Syria, went to Lebanon and Egypt.
Yeah.
And so as a result of those meetings and under the auspices of the Secretary General and the UN itself, they responded for the first time and said, okay, let's all get together.
That's really interesting.
And meet at the General Assembly on the occasion of the millennium. Just before, you may remember, all the heads of state came.
Was it before or after?
It was just a week before.
It was before? Was it really? I get confused. I thought it was... okay.
The religious leaders in before...
Try and set the tone. It's like the invocation or something for the...
4 hours of invocation for the opening night. And the real goal of it was to get support for the United Nations from the religious leadership.
For the United Nations and for
UN
peace.
initiatives.
And for trying to get initiative in peace. Now, I wonder... The thing that comes up, could I go back to the beginning of that? Was it Mr. Turner? Was it Mr. Bawa Jain? Was it Mr. Maurice Strong who got the idea? Can you remember as best you can? Where was the seminal? It was Mr. Turner.
Yeah.
Amazing what he's contributed. Right. It's amazing what
he... Came out of his mouth.
Yeah.
He just said, bring the religious leaders here and make them ask.
I'm going to start a new news. I'm going to start a 24-hour news channel. I'm going to do that. Yeah, he's got that way.
Do you think he knew about the meetings that we had at St. Bartholomew?
I think he has a vision. I think it was coincidental that it just happened to come at that time.
You struck a note because we had those meetings, and we thought, well, maybe we could do it. Maybe we could work it out. And it had never been done before. It was, it cost our firm a tremendous amount of time and investment in money.
Yeah.
We figured it cost us...
A lot of coordination,
It cost us about $1 million.
No kidding, really. That's a lot of money in any currency.
Our staff, just everybody
really
pulled
blew
together.
out the jams, right? Or kicked out the jams.
They worked day and night, weekend. We had people working around the clock.
Right.
It was extremely difficult, coordinating all this, the details.
And they coordinated out of your office, sort of on 57th Street there, very much so, and everything. Because you had these contacts with people all over the world.
All over the world, and there was a steady stream of religious leaders from all over the world coming into
New York
in the weeks preceding the event.
Well, you got a good spiritual training and contact that sort of thing. You got a spirit that kind of thing. Why do you think it is? I mean, I wonder if you can, because why is it that it hadn't happened before? You have all these spiritual traditions that talk to the issues of peace. The UN is dedicated to end the scourge of war and peace, and why hasn't there been a call for bringing in the spiritual leadership before it was, and Dena says it was the first time ever?
Well, there's been a sort of growing trend, I think, over the last century of bringing religious leaders to the Vatican's been very interested and had communications with different religions. My uncle, Louis Finkelstein, was the chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary and created an Institute for Religious and Social Studies in which priests and rabbis and ministers studied together their common interests at the Jewish Theological Seminary. And then he created something called the Conference of Science, Philosophy, and Religion.
It's another big dialectical difference. I mean, there's science.
Science and religion.
Yeah, right.
Einstein and others were involved in this, finding common ground. And so my uncle was on the cover of Time magazine as the first ecumenicalist.
Oh, right.
I think it was
when
in
was
1940. 1950, something like that.
Right, okay, good.
Around then, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of background. I worked with him on those programs, and he had a vision to try and develop that.
Yeah.
He died some years ago. And in a sense, it's almost coincidental that Bawa Jain and Dena and Maurice Strong and others came together, and Ted Turner, and said, let's have a gathering of this sort, which is kind of a culmination of the many, many other things that have happened during the last century. So, and not only the culmination, but we hope the beginning of new efforts in which religious leaders can work together. You know, as Ted Turner said, there's not an original thought, but many of the wars of the past have been started by religious leaders.
Absolutely, no question about it. There's been bigotry and everything, and all kinds of, in the names of all kinds of gods.
Look what's happening in the Middle East today.
I
know. The
Balkans, I know, right.
So the hope is that by bringing the top people in each religion together, and we're having another meeting, you can talk about the meeting we're having in the fall, that maybe some institution can be created where this idea can have an effect when there are conflicts in which religious leaders are involved. Maybe this kind of getting together can help create better understanding. Mention the...
Well, I've been working because a lot of my work in public relations is with religious leaders and religious groups.
It has been over the longer haul, even before you had this conference.
Before this. So I have seen that religious leaders so much want to play a role globally in helping to ease some of the problems, but they're used to speaking to their own constituents. Buddhist leaders used to speaking to the Buddhists, the Jewish leaders to the Jewish community. So they need to change the way they talk about some of the issues and really exactly. And they need a lot of help with that. So there were a few specific goals to the summit. One was to bring the religious leaders into the work of the United Nations to support the UN's efforts more. And the second is to create a World Council of Religious and Spiritual Leaders, which seems like such an obvious thing.
There doesn't exist such? No? The World Council of Churches or something?
Churches.
Well, there
churches.
That's Christian,
That's just Christian. It's just, and that's
interesting.
Not
I had it in my head. There's obviously something like... it's interesting.
There's no organization. There's no body where the senior Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, indigenous leaders.
Sikh, you had about 12 or 13 represented or something.
Can talk about critical issues facing the human community. Environmental, poverty, war.
And they all take positions on it, don't they?
Positions,
the Catholic bishops had incredible things to say and everything.
But they need to come up with a common vision for the human community or a shared vision. So
it's interesting. It's very interesting. You know, like we had the Declaration of Human Rights.
Well, it's almost like
that was like secular, I guess, or was it?
It was, and it was like before the United Nations was created. There was this idea to create a forum where nations could come together. But it took a long time to make that happen.
That's right.
Allow that to happen. So this is a similar kind of thing, creating a forum where religions can come together to talk about the critical issues, because they can't be resolved without the input of religious leaders.
Could I ask you something? Religions, there's a thing between religion, because there's religion and spirituality, and some people will say, I will be spiritual, but I don't want to be religious because they don't want to be tagged with so much
the organization.
The organization, and also religio. I think it has to do with hold, or it's a kind of thing that basically grounds people. I think if we look up the definition of religion, I think it's got a term hold, but for whatever reason there isn't. But then we've had in the modern experience also, you didn't have among the spiritual leaders, you didn't have any representation of something that might be called secular humanists, or many of the people who are of deep ethical concern about the human condition, but are not within one of the spiritual traditions. And is that important or not?
Well, that's why
how do we deal with that?
We call it religious and spiritual leaders. The Millennium Peace Summit of religious and spiritual leaders. We're talking about a body of religious and spiritual leaders.
Well, it's between religion and spiritual, but what about the secular humanists that are not?
I think they might go into the spiritual category.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay.
Had many.
How about that woman from Africa who had been out in the jungles with animals? What was her name?
Jane Goodall.
Who
was a very outspoken leader at the.
Gorgeous.
She was here with the.
I did a program with her.
Ella Gandhi was there. She's not technically a religious leader,
That's
but she's a deeply spiritual person committed to spiritual causes, as is Jane Goodall.
Well, I guess maybe we're parsing words or something, what we mean by spiritual. If somebody is a secular, that is, they're not turned to like say,
not part of organized religion.
Or not organized, or even, they're deeply scientific, and they believe in the scientific process, and they perhaps don't believe in some sort of overriding power or some sort of overriding intellect or a god or something, agnostic or even atheist, but they have very deep ethical concerns and so forth. I don't know whether or not that disqualifies them for being
That's not
spiritual.
necessarily. I think if they're deeply committed to human values.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But they do not believe in some God or some higher purpose or something that usually is the basis of
many Buddhists would say they don't believe in a deity.
Is that right? Oh, no, the deity, yeah, okay.
You know, but they believe in the values of the individual and they're deeply committed to the
Well, there were other groups. How about that group from South America?
We had the largest delegation, I think, ever at an interfaith gathering of indigenous. We had 100 indigenous leaders. So we had about a dozen from Peru, from the Andes in Peru, who had never come
out of the mountains.
Yeah, I know. I lived 2 years at Lake Titicaca.
Did you?
Yeah, among the Aymara and the Ulu.
Okay, so you know the Quechua people.
Well, these were. I don't want to. This is getting is Aymara actually. They were established pre-Incan. I mean,
pre-Incan.
They were. Quechua was Incan, but. Yeah, I lived among them. So I mean, yeah, and they have very spiritual way about their life and so forth, even into the nature. So it's a big issue and yet the secular-minded or the political-minded institutions, we in the United States have separated church and state, tried to, and so forth. Now, what are we trying to do? Get them back together, or what's going on in this world scale? You know,
in a different way.
Or how do we deal with that? And why?
Well, what I think
it's a big issue.
It's a big issue, and I've thought a lot about it because there has to be a way for our wisest leaders who have spent their life thinking about these problems to have input into what's going on in the world today. But it has to be pluralistic. It can't be one voice. It can't be one church. It can't be one tradition. I think because we are a diverse society, every part of the globe is becoming diverse. You go to Europe today and you see Hindu temples and you see Buddhist ashram.
The globalization
yes, part of the globalization. So you can't have a community where there's just one religious tradition having the voice into the affairs. So what we're talking about is a place where all religions can be on equal footing and come together in dialogue and provide input into some of the critical issues facing the human community.
And you brought all these together about a year ago over here in New York. You brought all these people together, and it must have been really something else with all those people here that were.
Well, Kofi Annan made a speech in which he said, "This is one of the most unusual moments at the UN's history."
Yeah. Well, you're bringing all this spiritual stuff in. Now, I don't mean to get personal or anything, but you've had an interest in these kind of things from before you
Many years.
Did you study theology or anything of that sort of thing?
Yes.
Or I don't mean to pry into your personal.
I did, actually, at Columbia. I got my master's in sacred literature.
Oh, you did indeed. Okay,
so I've read many of the sacred books of all the different religious traditions. And I've had a deep interest in religion since I was in college, really, many years ago.
Ecumenically, so.
Yeah.
You're interested in them all. Have you gone and studied in any of the Vedic traditions or that sort of thing?
Traditions,
There's a lot there, isn't there?
Well, a lot
there. It is, and it's something that gets ignored by our separation of church and state and our distrust of the religious fervor that has been underpinning to so many things that have happened in the past where people were fighting each other and everyone had God mit uns on their belt. Yeah, this is a problem.
It's absolutely. But I think we need to rethink in the modern context of the role religion can play. But I say it's important that it has to be a diverse dialogue.
But you know, Harold, it's one thing to have a conversation and make speeches. It's another thing to make a difference.
Yes, right.
And we've been struggling with that issue. Would it be possible when there is a conflict, as we have had and have in the Middle East and Africa and so on?
Oh, I'll tell you, it's
the former Yugoslavia. Is it possible that religious leaders can come at those critical points and help the United Nations stop the conflict? Is it possible?
Come and help the United Nations stop the conflict.
Working in conjunction.
As a resource for the United Nations.
There's a Security Council, the General Assembly, trusteeship. There's no spiritual
council.
Office or council or anything.
No,
is there any thinking about having that kind of thing brought into UN deliberations or efforts?
This is what we would hope this body would be.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, dear.
No, but the point is we don't know how it'll work. We would talk to Kofi Annan about it. Kofi Annan has pointed out that the UN consists of how many? 187,
It's
188
growing.
Governments.
Yeah.
They say
Governments. Yeah.
governments.
Yeah.
They are the instrument for these governments. Now, what the governments would agree to in regard to relationship with spiritual leaders is not at all clear.
Yeah.
So we're not pressing the issue that there should be some official tie
Yeah.
between us. We are, in a way, another non-governmental affiliate working with the United Nations.
Right.
And the question is whether we'll be able to find a way, as time goes on, for religious leaders not only to exchange views on spiritual subjects and our common beliefs, but to make a difference.
They become
political. Make a difference.
Yes, right.
It's not to talk about
We don't know
But it goes
theology,
to a comprehensive thing and a systems thing or something in a very large scale, the spiritual
Well, let me
things, too. They
give
go
you
to-
a specific example.
Yes, please.
I just came back from Bosnia
Oh, boy.
with one of our religious leaders, a Buddhist leader from Taiwan, who was very moved when the Buddhas were destroyed in Afghanistan.
Wasn't that something?
And he said, you know, religious leaders, this is, we finished this summit. If we don't act, then what was it for? We have to come together. So he approached us, he approached Bawa Jain, and he asked for help in forming a global commission for the preservation of sacred sites. He said, I'm willing to invest money in helping to rebuild. So we organized a trip to Bosnia, and we went to Sarajevo, we went to Banja Luka, we went to Mostar, and we met with all the religious leaders there, and the political leaders, and the UN representative. And it was very hopeful and also very very sad, because world attention has moved away from Bosnia. There's been very little healing, very little reconciliation. 1,000 mosques have been destroyed.
Yeah, I know. It's
About
awful.
500 Orthodox churches and
Yeah.
the Catholic churches.
Yeah.
But we asked each one of the religious leaders, what can the international religious community do to help you, to support you? They didn't say nothing. They said, thank God you've come. Just come
They
in
did.
here. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And this was the first time a Buddhist leader had been to Bosnia.
Uh-huh.
And they were so touched that he had taken the time, the effort, spent the money to come. And he said, I want to help rebuild a site from each religion.
Yeah.
But I want to only provide the resources where there's reconciliation, where the religious traditions, if we rebuild a church, let members of each of the communities come together to celebrate that rebuilding, so it doesn't get destroyed in 5 years or 10 years.
Yeah.
So this is the beginning of our work there. We're going to go back. We're having a meeting of this commission in Taipei, inviting all the religious leaders, well, the main ones from Bosnia, to come explore next steps.
In Taipei, in Taiwan?
Well, he's opening a museum of world religions, this Buddhist leader. So he's bringing them there for further discussion to see if maybe outside the environment they can create a better dialogue about how to move forward and how to engage the religious community. Now, we've been talking to Hindu leaders also. We said, you know, you talk about peace, you talk about nonviolence. How about coming to Bosnia and helping with rebuilding?
Yeah. You get some cross-fertilization, you find some of the commonalities that do exist there.
And that
if you
can't,
can.
it can't happen in the Middle East. It's too hot.
Yeah.
But Bosnia
Seemingly,
is kind of simmered down a little bit, so you can go in and there's no shooting.
Now you're doing this when you say we. Who's the we you're talking? You're talking about Is there UN involvement? Is that Ruder Finn or who's
This is
involved?
Ruder Finn,
Yeah, all right.
the Peace Summit, which is an ongoing organization,
Peace Summit. Yeah, all right. Yeah.
and
We created.
which we created, and this Buddhist leader, working closely every step of the way with the UN.
And trying to touch in with people like Maurice Strong,
With
and so forth,
Maurice,
with environmental
with
concern
UNESCO.
and yeah.
Working with UNESCO, working
Right.
with the UN representative in
Well, it's
Bosnia.
good to get some of these people who are not just political. I mean, people that have these kind of overriding values that can get together. It's important because there's a great deal of goodwill that can be got from there. That can be peaceful and soothing, and it's odd that it hasn't been able to be done sooner than it has. I congratulate you on the initiative.
It's a
All of you
challenge.
that are involved
It's
in
a
that.
challenge.
To try, because there's a tendency on the part of a lot of secular-minded people to say, well, that's something that ended with Galileo, or that stands in the way of progress. You know what I'm saying? A lot of the intellectual arrogance that don't want to look to those, and it should be looked at.
We did something for Mary Robinson's current meeting in Africa.
That's the one in Durban. Yeah.
In Durban on human rights.
Mhm.
There's a book on the table over there.
Right here.
Which we published for her. We
Let's-
designed and we created the book. And what it consists of is statements by religious leaders from around the world about human rights.
Yeah.
And as you can see, each statement is accompanied by a photograph,
Yeah.
a sculpture
Yeah.
from that faith.
I can try and show, let's see, here, like for instance, here's one. If you can come in, it's not a very good picture. Maybe we can get a little better picture in another run through of this. But this is a piece of sculpture. And
that's in Norway.
Is that Norway?
That's Vigeland, Gustav Vigeland. This is actually done with Dr. Albert Lincoln, who's Secretary General of the Baha'i International Community.
Yeah.
And we've tried to match that.
And what does he say? What does he say? Can you read it? You got your glasses? Can you read what it says?
Well, he said, look, he
no,
says,
over here, I mean this.
This is that human consciousness necessarily operates through an infinite diversity of individual minds and motivations, and detracts in no way from its essential unity.
Detracts, yeah, that's really a big and important theme.
So we show
unity and diversity.
That's it.
I don't know if you can see now. We show a sculpture by a Norwegian sculptor named Gustav Vigeland in Oslo, which I photographed many years ago, of humanity climbing up a stone structure.
That makes me look like something of Tamima Gazara. She's got a piece like that with stone. Remember that? Did you see that?
I photographed that one too.
But there's a number of these in here, and then here's one. What's this?
There's
another one.
That's Michelangelo's Moses, and the
What does it say?
It says, "Unity among religions and nations is desirable, but it is equally important to preserve the uniqueness of each people and religion."
So that's another variation on the theme. Yeah,
Chief Rabbi of Israel.
That's Chief Rabbi.
Chief Rabbi, and this is Moses by Michelangelo.
Yeah, well, that's the appropriate. See, so you got these things, and you've done that. And there's a bunch of this book is really handsome, and it's got a lot of these concepts. Here's one, another. Let's just show another, and maybe we can show some of these during. What does it say, Dena? Can you read or
read that?
Says, self-interest clearly lies in considering the interests of others, and this is. This is His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
Yes, the Dalai Lama.
Yeah, and this photograph is from the first famous black sculptor in America. And her name is Edmonia Lewis. It's worked down at a museum in Washington, and I happened to photograph that.
Just happened to photograph a piece of sculpture, did you? Huh?
That seems very appropriate for the Dalai Lama's remarks.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And these things are like haiku. I mean, there's things that you really can think and can focus the mind in these images without, with the ideas, like the idea of unity out of diversity. This is something that we do have to reach for, whether we come with our sacred traditions or our traditional traditions or secular traditions. This is something we need to reach for.
This book is being distributed in Durban.
This is being distributed, and this was put together, this book, Sacred Rights, was put together in commemoration of the conference on racism being held in Durban as we talk. This is now, we'll date this is August 30th in the year 2001. And that conference is just going. Well, listen, I want to get to the conference, but we have a piece of videotape from when the UN conference with religious leaders was held. There's a little piece that we have. We want to run that, if you don't mind, now about 3 or 4 minutes or so, and then just to set that into the record, and then we'll come back and maybe cue off that and then bring it up to the racism conference that's in Durban now. But we're talking with Dena Merrian and David Finn of the Bruder Finn Group, and if we could run that tape now, then please. Thank you.
The fundamental mission, in my understanding of every religious tradition, is non-violence to have peace. That's why we need to reflect on what we need to do differently now. And it's not easy. There are great challenges, enormous challenges.
In the 60 years of my lifetime, the human population has tripled from 2 to 6 billion. And the explosion of technology makes it easily possible with the push of a button that you can destroy all human life and maybe all life on the planet.
That's where we are right now. We have exhausted every other alternative. The stakes now are too high. We have just got to make space for one another.
We are in the position as Prophet Noah was when he put together in his ark all these snakes and rabbits and all other creatures that don't like each other, and they would eat each other. But they had to live in this ark together because they didn't have choice.
And either we're going to rise to the occasion and do so rather quickly, or we're probably all going to perish together.
I am from a place just northeast of New York City, in Greenland. And there I feel every single day what you do down here.
If there's a particular theology that says that I have to intervene in your life in order that you will be saved, is this not the ground for greater and greater conflict?
Talking about how many times Jerusalem is mentioned in our scriptures, comparing it with other scriptures where it might not be mentioned by name at all, achieves absolutely nothing.
We have entered a new millennium. There have been a number of initiatives, new initiatives. The world is changing. We're living in a global community. The internet has changed communications. People can feel bonded to people across the earth now in ways that they couldn't have before.
So something is happening, definitely. Just imagine after all these years, the range of the summit to take place, it's the greatest miracle that you could ever have expected that this should happen in the United Nations.
Your Holinesses, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this summit of religious and spiritual leaders is without doubt one of the most inspiring gatherings ever held here.
I have great hopes for the summit. But at the same time, I think that the religious leaders of today are not prepared for the challenges that we want to put on their shoulders. The religious leaders must come out and be courageous. They must speak out.
It is possible for religion to take a stand beyond personal agendas and begin to take a look at the whole community, not the sole property of one country, one nation, one sect, one group, but all of us are responsible for the wholeness of the world that we live in.
Every one of us makes a difference every day of our lives. And individual action, collectively, is what's going to change the world.
Each one of us has a task in this world. Now, some of us are called maybe to play out our life on a grand historical stage. Other people on a more personal, intimate, smaller stage. But who is to say what is more important? What is important is for each of us to meet those challenges that are right in front of us.
Don't expect that every problem of the world will be solved with the gathering of these religious leaders at the UN for the first time. This is the beginning of an initiative, the beginning of a process.
Excellency, this is the commitment to global peace that we've been working on for the last 16, 18 months.
Religions are languages, and each of us has a language in which God speaks to us. So, Judaism is the language in which God speaks to Jews. Islam is the language in which God speaks to Muslims.
There is a meeting of human hearts, whether the prayer was a Shinto prayer, or it was an Inca prayer, or it is a Sanskrit prayer, or some prayer in Hebrew. Prayer is a prayer.
There is oneness in all religion. That is the same God whatever name we call him, is the creator of all of us.
We're now talking about religious pluralism. What do our religious leaders in the Buddhist tradition, in the Jewish tradition, in the Christian tradition, in the Hindu tradition, in the Sikh, in the Shinto, what collectively can they bring to our vision moving forward? How can they collectively provide a vision for the human community?
Oh, that's really interesting. It goes on. Some of that was really good. They were talking about that, and the issues that were raised are really amazing. It struck me, Ted Turner, the religions, if we could, the spiritual traditions, they go back thousands of years, often like that, and the people are, I'm sure, spiritual leaders of goodwill throughout the millennium have been saying to their flock, variously seen and so forth, peace. Let's have peace. Let's love one another. They've been giving these messages and so forth. Ted Turner he was the one, he's secularly involved in secularly viewing the world. He's the one who said in his 60 years the population's gone to 6 billion, and we now have, largely through secular institutions, political and economic institutions, the ability to destroy our species. That is, there's been a change through time. So is there a particular unique quality to the existential challenge that confronts us now in a unique kind of way? And what is the relationship between these principles of love? Why haven't we had peace 2,000 years ago? Why didn't we have peace 500 years ago? Why have we been fighting over the long haul? And has something changed that maybe makes peace in the sense that, the existential sense that he was setting it, possible now that the religious traditions have been counseling for, but have not been able to bring into the human condition adequately to where we stop killing ourselves and so forth. If you can understand what I'm saying.
I think that it does become a moral issue. As I say, the environment, many people view that as an economic, a political issue.
Yes, many of the issues are.
But isn't it also a moral issue? How we depend on the environment. As the environment is destroyed, how is that going to affect the quality of life for our children? So I think what this summit was saying is that all of those critical issues are moral issues. So religious leaders need to have a key say, or at least a voice, in balancing out some of the economic and political concerns. You can't just say these are political concerns or economic concerns. There are also deeply spiritual concerns, how we treat our planet, how we treat our neighbors, the whole issue of poverty, and the growing inequality, globalization. Now, I have to tell you, right after the summit, we were approached by the World Economic Forum. To help bring the religious voice to Davos.
Really?
Yes.
They're going to have a religious gathering of the religious leaders?
We brought 15 religious leaders
at Davos.
To last year's Davos. And
as part of the major, the gathering of economic and political leaders, they had a group.
Same time.
And it was so successful that they launched a religious initiative. The World Economic Forum and the Millennium World Peace Summit issued a partnership for religious initiative to form a religious consultative council for the forum, so that religious leaders could engage with business leaders and political leaders at next year's Davos.
And when was that? I don't know.
January of this year.
January this year. So they had a religious contingent.
There was a religious contingent.
Or spiritual.
Actually, it was a segment of the conference by the religious leaders that took place in front of all of the business and political leaders. And that's going to.
And that was unique.
That was unique, and it's going to be continued.
Congratulations on having been able to bring that in.
And now this is going to continue as a permanent part of Davos.
It is.
Yeah.
And expand.
Were you there?
Oh yeah.
What was the reception to that idea? Was it generally?
It was the closing session, and we thought that many people have left. It was a packed house.
Really?
It was packed, and there were so many interesting questions from the audience of the religious leaders. And Klaus Schwab, who's the president and founder, was very touched, and he came to us right after and said, "Now we've got to expand this." The issue, the subject was peacemaking, how religious leaders could get more involved, and what their role is.
There was a phrase. Can they help us?
Can they? Where are the peacemakers? The world's religions, where are the peacemakers? But
can they be peacemakers?
Can they be? But the whole issue of globalization, which has become such a heated subject.
Of course, it's huge.
Was what they really spoke about was globalization, and now he wants to bring them more to the conversation of bioethics, of media, the moral responsibility of the media. We've developed a whole series of themes where religious leaders can have very valuable input.
Now, bioethics, say for instance, bioethics, you could have a great number of people within the scientific community. I don't mean to rob a hobby horse here or something, but the spiritual world, I mean, the question of spiritual and religious traditions where they claim a higher truth, this kind of thing, they got to read it like this. And then you've got this very highly skeptical, scientific, secular world of science and academic research and so forth. And by and large, many people have put aside the traditional religious concerns for a secular view of the world. And the questions of bioethics wouldn't need to be calling upon some message that came 2,000 years ago or something, because we're going to work it out within the context of what we have understanding of in the modern world. It's a question of modernism is a putting away the toys that we called religion in the past when we couldn't understand things in a scientific way like we can now.
It's changing the language. It's changing the language. The issues, the moral and ethical issues haven't changed.
You think now?
You talk about bioengineering, you talk about bioethics, you talk about stem cell research. There are ethical issues, there are moral issues that need to be discussed. And there are some people within the religious community who stick to dogma. But there are many others who are deeply thoughtful, who reevaluate their traditions within the modern context.
You might talk about this writer who was a Catholic priest and wrote a book, and we're now working with...
Well, just to talk about stem cells, since that is something...
Yeah, it's huge now,
We are working with, and this is Rudolf Finn, this is not the summit. Rudolf Finn is working with a Catholic, former Catholic priest, he's a theologian, who has formed an organization, it's an NGO, called the Religious Consultation on Population, Family Planning, and Abortion. And he's brought together 100 scholars from the different religious traditions to get their support, to talk about their viewpoints, to reinterpret the scriptures, the teachings on abortion. And they've come out with some quite amazing statements. And he's just published a book called Sacred Choices, which shows that there is within each of the traditions a different book. That's
Sacred Rights.
But it's interesting because it's a reinterpretation of traditions for the modern reality.
Oh, we have a problem in the world with do we have a problem in the world of dealing with modernity? We're living in a modern world with the change. If you look at the change, you've just been reading Ray Kurzweil on the change, the technological extensions of our consciousness. We've been here a couple 100,000 years on this planet, Homo sapiens sapien, and the change is going. It went for a long time like this. Change. It took 200 years to invent a nail, and they would go like this, and now it's going like that. And, it's going exponential upon exponential, it's L-shaped. So we're in some sort of a special moment now, and much of that is modernization. Much of the world doesn't want to get with the program of modernization. They want to stay with their traditional patterns that have been there for a long time. But that's one of the principal problems that confronts mankind of being able to deal.
Change.
Or do we draw upon our ancient traditions that were forged in a time when we did not have the understanding that we have now? And
you read the teachings of Buddha, you read the teachings of any of the great leaders, and they're as relevant today.
You think?
Oh, because they don't talk.
Who was wiser than Plato?
Yeah,
exactly.
Or Socrates.
Right. So the time factor doesn't have Mr. Turner again saying, if we were in terms of Plato, 500,000 BC, we had a few thousand years ahead of us, or a couple thousand years ahead of us before we were at a point where we could destroy the species, or we could destroy much of the life, as he put it. Apparently we have that now.
It seems more pressing. It seems more pressing now.
It seems more pressing now, like coming full-term pregnancy or something. We're coming to a point. Do you understand what I'm saying? And much of that tension between the globalization thing itself and the tension is between tradition, or Mr. Friedman at the New York Times talks about the Lexus, the fast train of globalization, the modernization, the fast-moving tech, and the olive tree and the traditions and so forth. And that's why I was wondering before whether or not in the spiritual considerations, if there isn't room for humanist or scientific humanist kind
I
of...
absolutely think there is, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think they need to be brought into the discussions,
Yeah.
into the dialogue.
Yeah.
Scientists and spiritual leaders, I think,
Yeah.
there needs to be much more integration.
And political leaders?
And political leaders and business leaders, the leaders of different
We need a
sectors of
dialogue.
society.
Yeah. You need a bigger hall than the General Assembly, maybe, you know. But it's good that you're bringing in these other kind of elements. Now, am I correct, that this, and then one other thing, here, let me show this if we can, is Move, which is the magazine that you published there. Ruder Finn Group publishes, and we wanted to show a picture because we can't do much, but you had written an article about the conference. Let me find it. It's a real handsome magazine.
Well, so many people on Ruder Finn staff were involved that we put together kind of a commemorative.
Yeah, now let's just show. This is a picture. This is like a family of man kind of thing.
Family of man.
I've got a picture of my grandson that I think belongs in the family of man. It just happens to be. But this is, and there was an article, and this is much of humanity being represented. But we had that conference a year ago, and was that organization, that committee involved with this thing that's going on in Durban now? And can you talk to that? The races. This book was written in support of that.
Right.
And can you talk about the linking between what happened last year with the spiritual thing, Davos in January, and then coming up to the events in Durban as we talk now?
Well, following the summit, many people have approached us, many of the UN agencies and the World Economic Forum, to bring together the religious support from the religious leaders for these initiatives. In the case of the World Conference Against Racism, Mary Robinson approached the summit, approached Bauer Jane, and said she would like to engage religious leaders early on to support the objectives of the summit. This was last February, when it was really just being formulated, right after Davos.
Yeah, right.
We were in Geneva, and we went to see her, and we talked about the idea of doing a book.
Yeah.
She said that she would love to have the statements from the high-level religious leaders from all the traditions to support what she was trying to do, to be distributed to the heads of state, to the ambassadors at the conference. So we actually participated in a press conference announcing the conference with her. And we brought some, Bauer was there, and we had the religious leaders from Geneva meeting with her to express their support for her. And from that, we just appealed to all the senior religious leaders from the many traditions. They responded very quickly and positively.
Yeah, so you got a network going. Huh?
The network is going.
That's important.
That's very important.
Of course, we've been worried, and the Secretary General has been worried about this problem of racism and Zionism.
Zionism, and it's come to a fore.
It took a different turn. This was in February, March.
They were worried about that from the get-go.
Well, they've been worried about that, and Mary Robinson and Kofi Annan have discussed that at length, and with Jewish leaders and with other leaders, and something very dramatic happened today.
Yes,
I know. Where Mary Robinson held up, as I understand it, I didn't see it, but I heard a report about it, held up a document that was anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
And she said, "I am a Jew."
Like Spartacus, huh?
Well, it was like, I think, Kennedy. Saying, I Berliner.
Yeah.
And very dramatic. And we hope that her leadership will make it possible for this conference to be successful and not end in a disaster, which it could with the whole...
Were you fearful? But the roots were there you were involved in the roots of this leading up to this Durban thing that's being called.
We weren't actually...
We
were not involved.
Mary Robinson was
This is really her thing. This is an official UN conference from the Human Rights Commission.
Right, but you're supporting it with the book?
We supported her with the book, and it was unclear at the beginning how much we would get involved. At this point, we just did the book.
Right.
There was a few months when it was very unclear how the agenda was going to go. This was in the spring.
Yeah.
And we saw it becoming more political, and there was less of a role for the religious leaders because it was becoming more of a political event.
Right, the event in Durban, right?
Yeah, became more political.
So these things blend, okay. You'd like to keep them purely separate?
Well, no. There are religious leaders I know who went individually, but not as a group. We didn't organize any delegation of religious leaders because other issues came in and it just it didn't go in that direction.
Yeah, right.
So we provided the book, and we've written extensively to the religious community asking for support for her work.
Yeah.
and for the success of the conference, because we think that all of the UN initiatives should be supported.
Yeah, right. And so they got this conference going now, and there is a continuity between the thing that happened last year, the gathering of or there was a degree of continuity. Continuity between that. And it might be well if it could be informed more by some of those spiritual things than they are. And yet at the same time, it's on racism, xenophobia, and related matters is what they're trying to...
But the tone will mostly be political, and the events that we have a greater role in organizing focus more extensively on the voices of the religious leaders, because we feel their voices need to come up. You see the statements in by the religious leaders about every tradition, they're all very supportive and positive of the diversity of the human family.
Oh, right, absolutely. They're all going to be saying that. But then when they come into the real world, that's when there's problems. So many of our clergy over the centuries have blessed the bombs that were going to be sent out in the name of that kind of thing. You know, ready? No. Oh, thank you.
Oh, my goodness.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear David. Happy birthday to you. Well, they've blown my cover.
Very kind.
We didn't know. We didn't.
Happy
birthday. We didn't.
Thank you so much.
Well, we were going to set it up at the very end, but we were aware.
You were surprised.
Of the fact that it's your.
Oh, well, that is a surprise. It certainly is. I don't know how you found out
And
about
I didn't
that.
get a chance to inform the audience that David Finn, who has been often a guest on our program, is the author and the photographer and the inspiration for this book called Sacred Rites. And this happens to be, if I may say so, David, your 80th book.
That's my 80th book and my 80th birthday.
And this is your 80th birthday today, so we wanted to sort of share that with the audience.
Wonderful. Very kind of you.
And to thank you for that. It's a handsome-looking cake and everything. Do you think you could? We got 2, 4, 6, 8 candles.
Hey, that's wonderful.
Decade,
Very appropriate.
We didn't want to fill the cake with all the candles because of the.
You think I should blow out?
Well, I think so. I think it might be a good idea. You think you can do it? You can blow it all out at once?
I can try. Now, I'm 80 years old.
I know. Well, you want a little help? Want a little help?
Well, we'll try now.
All right. All right.
What do you think about
that? Good.
All at
once. Good. Okay.
That's the nicest birthday present I've had.
Well, all right. This is good. Now, listen. You want to take this in, perhaps, right? And then we can give that to him after. And that sort of thing. But happy birthday, Dave.
Thank you.
Yeah, they came in with that. It came in a little earlier than I thought. But it really is something
that's a real surprise.
It's your 80th birthday and your 80th book, and God bless you for that. You know.
And he has many years left of good work, important work.
And 80 more, right? You just keep doing it, keep putting them on.
I'm interviewing for another article in Move magazine.
Yeah.
Friends of mine who are over 90.
I know, Tamima Gazara.
Tamima Gazara was one of them.
God bless her, yeah. And well, people are getting older now. They're living older. They're living longer.
I'm trying to find out if they have more vision, more knowledge, more wisdom. I'm not sure.
If they have Tamima to set the pace, I tell you, we'll have a hard time keeping up with her. And she's 95, you know.
She's 95.
95, and she's just, you can't keep up with her. She's great.
She was my teacher, as you remember, when I was 14 years old.
I know.
She was my art teacher.
Those are the kind of people that can inspire you. Right. You know, we need those kind of people, and that sort of thing. Yeah, I know, you're writing on that, and that's a theme. I know that people are living longer. I was at a conference the other day, and the infant born, now I just had my first grandson presented to me by my daughter and her
congratulations.
husband. Well, it's a year or so now.
That's
but that's the one that I think should be in the family of man, the picture of the boy.
Oh, sure.
But anyway, that they now are projecting a lifespan for an infant born now, actuarial people of 103.
Is that right?
That's what they were projecting.
Oh, isn't that something?
And my father was born in 1900, it was 48.
48.
Was the average life, yeah. So there's a lot of progress that's been going on. And Ted Turner, if I may, back to the theme of that book, is that, you know, and if I may, also another great person, it seems to me, Joshua Lederberg. I don't know if you're Joshua Lederberg, who was at Rockefeller University, bacteriologist. And we have the capacity, apparently, at this time. I asked him a question one time, if I may. At the end of I asked him, when the camera was rolling, if, because he's got a very great social responsibility, sense of ethics and that. And I said, we have all this technological capability we've extended out into the environment, knowledge base and so forth. And do we have, if there was a miscalculation on the part of an individual, geopolitical leader or something, do we actually have it down to the part where if there was to be a geopolitical miscalculation or something, or hatred or something, that we could render the habitat of the earth incapable of the continuation of our species? And he's the only person I've ever had say they didn't like the program, the question while the camera was running. I was embarrassed, but he was just wanting to maintain objectivity scientifically. No, but he came back and he said, no, we have. He said he reckoned, particularly with some of the bacteriological things. But the point, yeah, but he said the point that he made was that we'd only just crossed that line. I mean, in the Second World War, we couldn't do it.
Right.
Korea, we couldn't do it. We didn't have, in his reckoning, it was only about it would have been about 15 years ago now. Against 200,000 years of human history, we get to the point where we can destroy, as Mr. Turner said, a good deal of our whole species and a good deal of the bio. That's a Promethean capability that the averse side of which might signal some sort of a fulfilling of spiritual traditions and thoughts in a liberating way that we haven't been able to think about throughout the long haul of the human experience. This may be a particularly pregnant time in the evolution of consciousness.
You know, Kofi Annan said that the 20th century was the bloodiest century in history, which of course it was, and asked, what is the 21st century going to be like? We don't know yet. I'm not sure it's so promising. We've had a lot of wars going around the world. And now with the current administration in Washington talking about a shield to protect America, fearing that that rogue states may be the first to use nuclear weapons.
Well, yeah.
What can religious leaders play a role?
Can they? I think we should be.
They must.
I think, in a certain sense, we should be calling on all forces of goodwill in this particular time. And it's an existential moment for mankind. In a certain sense, is the thing in which I'm calling, and it shouldn't be just left up. Somebody said once that wars are too important to leave just to the generals. You know, I mean, you know what I'm saying. The human affairs have to bring in all sources of goodwill.
Business leaders.
Business leaders, they all have to be brought in.
We feel very keenly about the responsibility of business leaders to get involved in global issues, to play a role.
And to find some answers to the questions that people, economics, we need some sort of this globalization thing going. And then when you get into a thing like we're talking, sadly, the Durban conference has been not able to be well participated in by Mr. Powell or others because of the Zionist issue that the anger rages there now in a way that is very, very disturbing and unsettling. I mean, that kind of thing. What if this anger gets to the point where it's not just
words?
Not just words. Well, we've got words. We've got suicide bombers with that. But what if it gets to be where you've got a suitcase? Atomic or sarin or something where it really gets out of hand. You know, it's a very worrisome thing, and we really have to call on forces, on all forces we can of goodwill in order to try and come to the challenge that we confront. It's a very exciting time. The Chinese warned us against living in exciting times. It's exciting, but it's really very, very difficult as well. And I just want to congratulate you on having been able to make this initiative toward that spiritual community and to bring them into accord with the geopolitical leadership greater degree and bring
we have a lot of work to do.
We do indeed. We all do.
But we're committed.
We're committed. We might as well. See, we've been at this for a long time. And
encouraged.
You are encouraged by a number of these
encouraged by the response of the religious leaders.
Because this thing we can talk about here is probably felt at a certain really deep level by a great number of the human family who know this at a distinctive level.
You don't hear about it, but there are a lot of people of goodwill.
I think so.
And a lot of people in positions of power, business leaders. I've been very heartened by some of the business leaders.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, we've run out of time. Dena, it's so nice to see you. And David, happy birthday. Thanks again for another handsome book. It's your pleasure to have the Perceptions of Dena Merrian and David Finn, the Rudder Finn group talking about human rights and spiritual questions, and happy to have brought you those perceptions. We'll be coming back again next week. That's it for now. And once again, thank you very, very much. And thanks for coming in very much. Good to see you again.
Harold. Good to see you.
Yeah. So it's just ongoing. We're still running the credits here, so they're just doing that. But it's ongoing. I still like Buckminster Fuller. I keep referring to Buckminster Fuller, and Maurice Strong is involved on that with the Earth Charter. Yeah, it's a challenging time. I don't know what's going to come out of that thing.
Have you had Maurice on your program?
I had a wonderful program with him.
Did you with
about the book, when he talked about being a duck.
That's right.
Remember, he said he had to go and pretend being a duck up at Hudson's Bay.
I didn't hear that one.
Oh, that was funny.
I have that video.